Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello, welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me tonight is going to be Ron, and I may be pronouncing his last name incorrectly. I'll let him correct me in a moment. Milione. And we're going to talk about some UFO detectors that he's invented, if I understand this correctly, and perhaps some other things that he's got going on that I may not be aware of. And, well, quite frankly, I got an email about him in one of the groups I was in, and I thought these UFO detectors sounded quite interesting, so I made it a point to get a hold of them. Thought you guys might like to hear about it. So, Ron, how are you doing tonight?
Good. How you doing, Royce? It's, yeah, you pronounce it Milione.
Milione. Okay. Gotcha.
Close enough. Well, for, somebody, for redneck to an Italian, I give you a lot of credit.
I really do apologize. I'll be honest with you. I do have trouble with names, at least at first.
Okay, man. That's okay. You ain't the first one, and you won't be the last one either.
Yeah, right. Well, a lot of people call me a lot of different things, too. At least they very seldom ever call me Halloween.
That's right. Happy past Thanksgiving as well.
And the same to you. Hey, I got to tell you, I've been to your website, and you're a very interesting man. You get around, don't you?
Yeah. If I actually tell you what I do in my real life, your head would probably spin. Yeah, I mean, I could touch a little bit about that down the line, but it's definitely for the, you talk about people that, that they get all types of crazy stuff at different military bases in Area 51 and all that stuff. Well, that's what I do on a daily basis. So I could tell you what really goes on high level and put some of the skeptics apart and say, no, there's no really aliens walking around in Area 51. That is not the MO of that base. But what's intriguing about the whole thing here is if you take this whole paranormal world, I mean, I call it parapalooza.
Okay.
Bigfoot, cryptozoology, and all stuff. I mean, most of it is hoax and made up. Okay, and not to burst anyone's bubble out there. I mean, is there unexplainable events? Absolutely. I mean, in the field of ghostology, let's call it. I mean, there is what we call sometimes an area of suspended universe where a deceased doesn't go on. It's kind of still stuck in the present life form, and people see, apparitions and all that stuff. And you could photograph it. You might get some EVPs, recordings. But the whole part of that is you only could go so far, and you can't really, it should come to a limitation, right? Or you can't capture a ghost and contain it. So, yeah, I could say, is this place could be haunted? Not that I'm going off subject here, we're talking about UFOs, but what I'm trying to say is you could only go to a certain point, and that's about it. I mean, you could get a little bit more creative instrumentation or detection, but you're really not even going to say, hey, I got Aunt Sally, kept as a trophy in this enclosed system, so everyone come and see. And and she'll actually speak to you in real time and tell you what's happening on the at the end of the tunnel, all the so-called heaven and earth, right? So what I'm trying to get at is there's some explained, some unexplained. But what's interesting about the UFO business, that the further back you go is more interesting than the present day. The present day,
yeah.
You got quite a collection of software applications could really capture your imagination. I mean, you basically got between Adobe Edition, Photoshop, and everything else. I mean, you can create some really fantastic Hollywood, convincing aircraft or spacecraft coming from an unknown planet and say, look what I saw.
A guy did that a couple of years ago. It was on YouTube. I remember it.
Yeah, exactly. So what you do is you go back to stuff that was before computers. So you go back to like the 60s, and then the 50s, and then the 40s. There, it's very, very difficult and a lot more challenging to make hoax than it is today. Today, actually, the average kindergarten kid could create a very ingenious hoax, and most adults will probably believe it because of, the technology that was used, that used, especially on the application level. But as far as if some of these things defy physics, stuff like that, like magnetic vortexes or disturbances, there is instrumentation out there that could detect that stuff. But it could prove that it's an unidentified flying object, but it does not prove that it's an aircraft or something from, another planet. In other words, it could be something unidentified to our normal means of transportation as the public knows it. Now, let me give you one thing as a fact. People might be hard to swallow this, but because I deal with the military, especially in the technology side. The military's technology is about 25 years ahead of what the commercial technology that you and I, or let's call it the average John Doe out there, is used to. So if you walk into a Best Buy and you go, hey, 3D TV and all this type of technology, well, you'd be surprised what the military has. This figure almost 25 years more factor into it if you speed it up in time, like fast forward. That's kind of stuff that they're working on today that they actually have in prototype that works. So you got examples of the B-2 plane, you got the F-117 Nighthawk. Way back in the early 60s, you had the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71. These are just incredible machines, and just to show you what man could develop. And then, again, you deal with limited computing back in the 60s to make the U-2. Kelly Johnson did it in 9 months. So you imagine you take today's technology, and then you push 25 years plus on an average, and you get some amazing UFOs out there. So stuff flying over Nevada, not too far from where you are, because you're more closer than I am. It does right angle turns and stuff like that. Well, they're not your green people from, Zeta Reticuli. There was just some advanced, really advanced, sophisticated technology that we're testing and developing. But again, I stop and I slow down and I go, but you take a couple cases back in the 60s and the 50s where you can't really pinpoint where did it come from. We didn't develop it. We didn't have that development capability yet. This is way before any of our advanced aircraft. We have cases where some objects were 25 to 2,800 miles an hour, where our fastest aircraft did not break the speed of sound or the sound barrier that was tracked on radar. Was it a meteorite? Was it a weather balloon? What was these objects? So about 5% of all the cases ever known to man as far as this phenomena is about good 5% that really needs a good looking or good analysis of what could these particular past cases could be, So that's what kind of intrigues me, is like there's a small percentage that it could be a capability. It could be some visitor is passing by.
Right.
Come by, swing by. They took a look and said, hey, this is pretty cool. You guys are pretty well backwards, but we're not going to land here. We're going to keep going.
Hey, I think they do that an awful lot anyway.
Yeah.
So, real quick, I got a question from the chat room. Let me run that by you real quick. before we get too far along. And Jennifer wants to know, what do you think about John Titor and his time machine built with the IBM parts, and maybe it's linking to, I guess, Red Burns or Ed Burns, who was a computer engineer who saw the triangular ship aircraft in Hudson Bay.
What do I think about it?
Yeah.
I mean, could it be? It could be debunked, but to a point. You kind of get it. There's more data that we'd need to really debunk it. But it's a good, it's a good case. It's a good situation. But again, there's a couple things that's got to be reevaluated,
right,
and looked at. See, the other thing too is, if these really are intelligent probes, there should be, out of all the amount of population out there, there should have where it would actually, the odds of one of these things crashing again. Let's talk about like the Roswell case, but crashing again should be logical. In other words, it should happen. But something's real interesting. I was on an actual case in 1970. This actual case in 1974 that dealt with the Mexican government and the United States of a high-flying, high-speed UFO that crashed into a civilian airplane. The debris field was in Cayome, Mexico. We actually went out to the desert, and actually the small town of Cayome, south of Texas. It's about 75 to 85 miles in off the southernmost border of the Rio Grande River in Texas, out in the middle of nowhere in the desert. I'm talking about the middle of nowhere. You would definitely need a specific, really good guide to get into that general area. That's where it's kind of hidden. But we went out there with this guide and a bunch of guys, and we got some debris that we picked up. And what's interesting is, it's this middle of nowhere. You got these samples of this jellification of metal, and brought it to a laboratory. The laboratory says there is a couple of unknown kind of alloys that really is more tagged for extraterrestrial alloys than Earth. In other words, that has more of some cosmic impurities in it. So how can that be? So in other words, it looks like it looks like if you weld it about 2,000 degrees, and also you get some kind of, you have liquid aluminum or liquid iron, and it just basically gets hard. But it's in a regular, shape. And you look at it, you go, what is this doing here? I mean, there's the furthest place of civilization is about 25 miles away to where we were, in the middle of this desert. There's nothing but mountain ranges and stuff around us.
Right.
And it took a good half a day to get to the place. There was only about 50 miles by linear distance if you use Google Earth. But by the time you took the roads and they go back and they wind, and then the terrain is basically non-paved, it's a half a day worth of travel. So what we found is a real case. The case involved with the U.S. government and the military of the Mexican Air Force, and they basically we looked at some interesting information in the government of Mexico, and they basically said that your government came over and took this crashed spaceship back to America for studies, and that one of the Mexican intelligence guys told us off the record that this was being tracked by radar by our government and plus by your government, and at that time there was nothing traveling at 2,300 plus miles an hour at an elevation of 70,000 feet. But the interesting thing is that when this UFO came down It stepped. It came like if you were going down a flight of stairs, okay? Let's say your flight of stairs is, say, 10 steps. But if you walked out straight, instead of going down the steps, you would travel 6 feet straight out, right? So this picture, you're walking down the steps. Each step you walk down is 6 inches, right, further away from the top shelf. That's how this UFO was coming down. It was coming down like a step motion.
Oh, wow.
So that rules out any type of high velocity meteorite, any type of inbound, satellite debris, or any other space junk coming in. So it was stepping like in a very intelligent navigational way. Of every quarter mile, it would just step down and then decelerate. So we're using the stepping pattern as a deceleration. So getting back, we got a piece of evidence, but we can't really say, hey, it's a real UFO from an alien planet or whatever. Now, I did run to a bunch of guys over there that actually made a mobile UFO detector systems, actually out of like a small SUV. It actually has a 360-degree tracking antenna that just basically sweeps for. They basically tune into like white noise, and just like if a meteorite goes, if you're tuned into a distant station, and the meteorite passes over the horizon, the ionization, the reflection of that fast-moving object will cause radio waves to bounce, oscillate in the upper atmosphere, and you actually will hear like a station come in like go out like that, and you would say, hey, something flew by fast. So these guys came up with some real simple system, but an effective system that they put in this SUV, and they actually hang around the desert and they drive around. These are guys that we came across are real true UFO hunters. So that's what drives me into making some field portable unit that if you're going out hiking or you're going somewhere, and you put up this device, and basically it's just looking at a circumference of the magnetic footprint that you're around, and if something magnetically if it's strong enough, then it could change the baseline of where you're located.
Right.
The detector will go off and say, "Hey, the magnetic field is just kind of just switched over 7 degrees. So let's sample it. Boom, let's set off an alarm." So it's almost like if you were walking true north with a compass, and all of a sudden you just make a left or right, and now you're turning 90 degrees. That's a very dynamic change in direction. Now your system's going to go, now you're walking west or you're walking east. So that's how my sensor works. Is kind of, if it's stationary and all of a sudden it's a change in direction due to some outside interference, set up an alert. In other words, let me know about it.
Okay, now how portable exactly are these units? I mean, can you put them in a pocket, or do they have to actually go into like a vehicle, or how big can they be? How small can they be?
Take your average Samsonite suitcase, where you have the head end unit and then you have the receiver unit, a couple battery packs. Just basically, like a regular business type of. Let's put it this way: bigger than an iPad 2 form factor. I'm talking about carrying case, but your average laptop case that would carry the field unit anywhere you want to go.
Okay, so then it could be conveniently put in, say, like a backpack.
Exactly.
And this thing would let you know if you're walking, say, like toward the UFO or away from it?
Basically, you would have to do is there's two methods to this thought. you would have to do is you would be like a listening station. So you go somewhere and you basically sit. Right. So you pick a spot. You sit. If you pitch a tent. At that point there, you basically deploy the receiver system, and he just sits stationary. Now, depending where you are, I mean, just like anything else, you don't want to be inside like like a forest or a tree line. You basically want to be out in the open. So, in other words, you could be in some flat area, like say, like in Utah, for example, or if you're up in the terrain, up in the mountain range somewhere, if you're out in Colorado, anywhere you get open space, like in Arizona, New Mexico, and some beautiful places out there, or we are here, up on the East Coast here, anywhere flat or up in the open areas, like we got Whiteface Mountain, for example, way upstate New York. But the bottom line is you have it out in the open, and you set up camp, and basically, it's just basically like you're setting up a radio receiver system, and you're waiting for any frequencies to kind of come by your way that's being ionized. In other words, it's basically being changed by some fast-moving object. Now,
right.
Fast-moving object could be also, extraterrestrial, natural, of a comet. Now, the comet could generate enough ionization that could basically, all right, system goes off, there could be a magnetic change in the footprint where I'm sitting due to the high ionization that's being caused by this high comet going by, but it gives me an indication that there's some action going on. So looking up, and if they do see something whiz by, it is unidentified, number one. Number two, it can't be tracked unless someone else could record it, and then you can look at it later on the internet. Or, it's something to be more researched. So, you got to filter out between what's extraterrestrial that's on a planetary or comet or an asteroid compared to a real UFO as far as that belongs to that 5% class, in other words, of what really is this object and where did it come from and what direction was it going.
Sort of like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there.
Oh, that's okay.
I was just going to say, it sounds to me it's sort of like the EVP of the UFO, community.
Mm-hmm.
Or did I say EVP? I think I meant to say.
Yeah. Now, it's all based on, don't forget, it's all based on how much research and instrumentation. So, you could take some of the commercial communications equipment and redesign some of the components in there and make it more like, a kind of a scanner. This thing is like a regular communication scanner. So on a regular communication scanner, I could scan certain frequencies, and then I could do is listen to a certain area and reject another area. So, for example, I'm going to listen to aircraft communication traffic, but I want to ignore fire communication traffic. You could do that with a scanner. So the UFO detector is basically more wideband. But it's not selective. In other words, can I really do real selective filtering is the term I'm looking for on that system? Not at the present design, but on an upgrade or down the line, yes. Now, it all involves money, right? I mean, if you got a huge budget, you can make some really kick-butt systems out there, absolutely. But now, you're not going to go to an industry and go, hey, I want to make the world's best UFO detectors. They'll kind of say, well, wait a minute, sir. No, we're not selling it. We won't be able to sell one, but if you could come up with, 4D TV, we'll talk to you. So it's supply and demand, too. But as a hobbyist or as a researcher, you could like say, I tinker around and then come up with some basic components or basic systems, and then kind of custom change or custom design to accommodate what I think I want to kind of let this receiver, you could call it / scanner, tune to, and then see how it works. So, for example, like meteorites on a basic FM radio, you can actually make a basic FM radio alert you that there's a meteorite, let's say shower or something going by, because you would hear almost like a Doppler effect. In other words, like a zzz. That's because the atmosphere is ionizing from that meteorite, who is basically causing a magnetic disturbance through the way upper layers. I'm talking past the atmosphere. In other words, I call it in the space sphere. Say if it's even 400, 800,000 miles away. I mean, the power of some of these things causes such oscillations through the whole entire system, all the way down to our atmosphere, and then we get reverberations from that effect. Everything just ionizes, and then affects your little place here on the planet Earth. You have these simple receivers, like I say, this FM radio. They could act as a really cool and very accurate receiver for meteorite detection. So you take that on another level and you go, well, what if I'm going to track some fast-moving UFO objects? Again, I'm not saying they're from, they're from Zeta Reticuli, but it's a good instrument. There is something out there that you could go beyond your eyes, ears, nose, and your five senses, right?
Right. That sounds very interesting. One of the things I'd want to ask at this point, though, is from what I heard you say a minute ago, there's none of these actually on the market yet. These are really something you're doing for a hobby, right?
Yeah. The reason is I had there's a gentleman years ago who who was in charge of the disclosure of, he had like 200 so-called people involved with the military and the FAA. Dr. Stephen Greer, Greer. Greer. Dr. Greer had a guy, Tom, who was his chief scientist. This guy lived up in New Hampshire. He contacted me about 6 years ago to make a custom UFO detector. They would not give me the information of where it would go, where they were going to place it, and what they were going to do with it. But it was a simple system, closed system, size of a shoebox, that they paid about $275 for. It took me about a week's worth of off-hours effort to build it and test it. And when I tested with, we call false positives. In other words, some force magnetic fields change in direction, and then have the unit react to that. That's how I could calibrate it. So they picked up a unit and they returned it once for calibration, and I haven't heard any other future results about what they were doing with it. So I had some other interest a few times, but I would say out there, you can put it on a Toys R Us shelf or Amazon.com. It wouldn't sell as many, like say, as compared to any other nice product out there that makes more sense to people, right?
Right. So tell me this then. Is there somewhere that a person could go, like a website that would have like a sort of walkthrough on how to make one of these things? There's a limited amount of stuff on the net for, you can make it a real simple magnet hanging from a string, and if the magnet, like a rare, we call it a rare magnet that you could actually pick up at any electronics stores, and
this have it suspended from a string vertically, have the string attached from an L pole, like a stand, have a string come down attached to the stand and the magnet, so it just sits perfectly still. And if that thing actually ever moved or anything or start or oscillate, yeah, you get some magnetic disturbance. But how do you get indicated of that? You don't. You don't have a. It's not a smart system, so it's a static, dumb system. You would have to actually stare at it all night and see if it moves. So that's not using any sophisticated electronics.
That's not very convenient either.
It's not convenient, right? It's not fast. What happens when you're sleeping? How are you going to get notified? So the system I have is battery operated, and it's run by a little a program, a microcode program. You turn it on, and what it does, after 4,000 milliseconds to 4 seconds, you hear one beep, like a beep. That means the electronic magnometer is active. In other words, it's in monitor mode. And what it does, it scans the 4 poles, north, south, east, west, north, south, east, west, really quick. And it will just basically stay there. And the output is in a high-pierce acoustical transducer, almost like a tweeter on a speaker type. And if something disturbs it, any magnetic changes, the program looks at it and does how much of a variation, and it does this in real quick. I'm talking, it does it in very small milliseconds. Makes a decision, go, oh, yep, that's a for real disturbance. Let's set off the alarms. Boom, the alarm goes off, and of course, if you're within the general vicinity, you hear the alarm, you know something happened. Now you could take it on the next level, where that you take that output and you could drive a relay, and a relay could set off all types of alarms. To notify you. And then the next thing is have a system like this out in the field, solar power, and then actually, this is where it gets sophisticated, could use almost like a cellular type of transmission, and then you could get a text message or notification. Using the 3G or 4G network as a network backbone. So you could get to that level. So you could have a system that monitors, the magnetic area, does some decision making, knows that it's a real event, takes that, we call it a trap that message, and then send notification out. So send it by a cellular frequency carrier, and then you get that information, and you could even generate an email or a text message. Now that's at the high end. So there's capability of doing that.
Okay. Also,
we can swallow that for a second.
All right. I was going to say we had another question in chat. Was Jennifer was wondering if you had any clues as to why ET is visiting Earth.
That's the greatest question. Now, if you look at everything else, if I was them coming here, first of all, if I could come in and out of dimensions, and I could travel through so-called wormholes instead of linear distance, going straight, and all that type of Einstein stuff. What's interesting about it is I wouldn't come to look at your technology because you don't have anything to offer. You really think about it, your technology is really primitive. I mean, really primitive. I mean, you still have laptops that rely on this so-called battery, and eventually the battery dies. And if I was saying, well, don't you guys know how to keep the energy going? You know, what's his battery? And then his battery's got to be. So this battery goes back to, you know, back to the 1900s when the first storage system, charge and recharge. It's nothing new, except that it's more, you know, it's more the form factor. In other words, the size. It's small. It fits, you know, but it's still using kind of basic electricity foundations. So what I would be interested in, and Jennifer opened up a great point, is the human beings. Why? Everything else on the planet's almost duplicated except if you look at the animal kingdom, you look at the human beings, but every human being is unique. Every single person is totally unique. So if you got 5 billion beings, and every single one at the same time could have 5 billion different thought patterns, that not one of them is duplicated. So in other words, if I'm sitting at a bus stop, and the guy next to me is sitting at a bus stop, and I could be just thinking at that point, oh man, what I'm going to bring home for dinner tonight? And the guy next to me goes, man, I wonder what bar I should go after work. Now, if I could read your minds as an alien, I'll go, man, this is unique. These beings, whatever you call them, are really interesting things to study. So that gets me back to a classic and the best so-called, I wouldn't call it an abduction case, even though it's considered it. I mean, they weren't taken away. They were examined, supposedly, you know, on the ground, is Betty and Barney Hill back in 1961. You got that's the world's best case that I'm still fascinated by, based on they happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. So you get this so-called visitors coming by, and they get attuned to these couple driving in White Mountains in New Hampshire to a point where they actually take control of their car. The car guides off Route 3 into a wooded area. The spacecraft has landed, and they come out and they take these two and they examine them. And they're examining because, hey, the skin color on one guy is different from the woman. Why is that? Betty's teeth are permanent, where Barney's teeth are removable. He has dentures. And they're having all sorts of fun. In other words, if I was trying to visit the planet, the human beings is what the attraction would be. What makes each one unique? You know, every single one is unique. So to answer Jennifer's question, that's the only reason if I'll come back to visit. Not because of the nice beaches or the sand, or of course you got this wild animal kingdom out there, but it's the human beings. They're just, each one is unique, where maybe they are designed to be cloned. In other words, they have levels. It's called levels. Level 1, they're all the same. Like 1 is private, 2 is a corporal, 3 is a sergeant. But they're all the same. They all think the same. They all feel the same. They all act the same. They all, you know, react the same, depending on what level you are. So when they come across the planet Earth, they go, hey, they don't have the same foundation or the same regiment that we do. In other words,
they have no rhyme or reason.
Yeah. So, right. There's no organization in there. One guy could scream, the other guy's crying, the other guy's laughing all at the same time. Now, it doesn't work in our world. It's something in their world. What makes them different? That's the curiosity. That's why I would come and say, hey, we need to examine these people.
Okay. Now, also, I meant to mention to people that were listening at iTunes or Shoutcast or one of the other locations that the call-in number is 832-632-7904. And the website here is www.paranormalpalace.com. If y'all want to come over here, join the site, get into the chat room, and sign up for the newsletter. And also, Ron's official website is www.alpventures.com/top secret/Ron_Milione.html. And
yeah, that's one of them. Yeah, great.
well, that was the one I found that said your official page, so I went with it.
Yeah, that's fine.
You have another URL you'd like to mention, or two?
Well, I have the Facebook account, but what's bad about that? They have I'm saying that it's maxed out at over 5,000, and I'm basically on Google Plus. That's you guys can catch me on Google Plus. So, which is kind of, yeah, I don't know if it will be Facebook's competition, but there is an unlimited, at least an unlimited venue as far as people in your circles. It's an interesting architecture that Google put out there. But you could just put in my name, Ron Milione, and you find me on Google Plus in about 5 seconds.
Okay, that sounds like a winner to me. Also, I didn't want to let you get out of here without talking to you at least briefly, if nothing else, about anti-gravity. That's a subject I'm kind of fond of because I think it was partially what was used in the building of the, Great Pyramids, because I think it was the guy that built Coral Castle said he discovered the Egyptian secrets, and I think he was using magnetics or electromagnetics to levitate the heavy stones, which is probably what the Egyptians did. And I thought I'd run it by you and see if you maybe had something different or similar to add to that.
No, it's a good point. If you think about those stones, the average stone is about 2.5 tons, the small ones, and this is the way took them supposedly over 25 years to build one. But there is something that was there was a so-called battery that was invented almost in the similar time era back then, which they were experimenting, and they got this spark, and they got so-called some kind of what we'll call as pulse, but what they call is light, lightning of light coming out, that playing around and generating some kind of electric field that you could create a force where if you got, if you have a like pole and an unlike pole, you have an attraction. If you have a like pole and a like pole, there is rejection. In other words, a repelling. So if they're playing around between, say, a positive pole and a negative pole, that's where you have positive pole to positive pole, where basically you can almost create a lift, like an invisible lift. So can you imagine that they were able to generate such a lift that they could actually levitate a stone, like you mentioned at the pyramid level. Now, where does the external influence come in? In other words, was there an ancient alien that came by and showed them how to perfect this? And the accuracy and just the way that it was precisely put together. Now, a couple of guys in the last couple of months said they found some kind of road, like a ramp. This picture of ramp going around the pyramid, that's how they would move the stones, push the stones up through so-called semi-crude wheel system. I don't buy it too much because I don't see on the rest of the areas there that there's any road structures. Did you? So I have more of a tendency that if you played around with electric, again, there's no no electric around back then, right? I mean, before Edison.
Right.
But if you could actually, through the composition of the different minerals and quartz, I mean, you could actually conduct a charge, and if you have enough of the minerals together, that you could increase the charge, and you could create this. I call it this. It's actually electricity is a force. It's electromagnetic force, EMF. So the EMF, if you change the EMF field, then you could generate enough naturally from minerals, which you can do, which they done in 1066 AD, with the what was it called? The Baghdad battery. That was the term. They created a sophisticated battery, like if you even think something like Eveready did today. I mean, same concept. That you could basically anti-gravity. You could actually cause it to lift and generate up. Absolutely. Again, you got to take it on such grand scale mode to get something at that level on the pyramid level to do it. But is it a possibility? I mean, theoretically, yes, you can. And if you got enough resources, and you got enough physical resources, and you got enough material resources, you could create quite a bit of a spark. Yeah. I mean, don't forget, all you have is time on your hand. So if you got 25 years to try to perfect something like this, and let's say it took them 25 years to play around, another 25 years to get some of the stones in place, and another 25 years to get the construction going, because they only said in 25 years it was built, but how much was all the research time, the material time, and all that? It's not really that many records that dictate that. There was no daily journal. Yeah, you could do something like that, So it's not far-fetched at all. I mean, it's you could even buy a superconducting kit for like $30 that you could put in your, kitchen and have levitation rise right in front of your eyes, playing around with, with some gases that, you could pick up. But there's a couple of companies that sell it. You could even Google it, superconducting kit, which is it's basically going really cold in temperature. Can you buy liquid nitrogen over the counter and stuff like that? You could buy anything. What I'm saying is, you could do something on a small scale and it actually does work, levitates, and you can do something on a grand scale. You get the same effect as long as you get the resources and the proper, the proper methods going.
Right, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, now, it does. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to mention that we got like 12 minutes left, and I wanted to make sure you had a chance to tell the listeners here if you had anything, coming up in the near future you'd like them to know about.
I'll give you a really interesting story. There's a place in Utah, 155 miles southeast of Salt Lake City. And it's a ranch. It's 440 acres. And the term of the ranch, or the so-called street name of this ranch, which is owned by a person called Sherman. And the Indians has a old saying about this area. Shape changer. The mystery of the shape changer. The other name applying to this is called the Skinwalker Ranch. I don't know if you ever heard of anything like that.
No, not that I can think of. I mean, I've heard of shapeshifters, but I've never heard of this particular ranch, in other words.
Well, it's a gentleman of mine, a friend of mine, who actually owes me a book, which he hasn't sent back yet. But George Knapp of KLAS TV was the guy that originally interviewed Mr. Lazar back in 1984. He's the one that kind of came out and said, well, I worked at Area 51 and I re-engineered some UFOs and et cetera at a secret base called S4. Well, George Knapp broke that story, but George Knapp's also a very great investigative reporter. He came across this ranch. So the ranch is basically almost like a wormhole in this planet, as far as the Bermuda Triangle is out between between tip of Miami out to Bermuda and coming back, to the East Coast. So say that type of vortex. In that case, is like ocean, ocean type of conditions, right? Here we have a ranch, which this portal or portals is basically the Shermans living on the ranch had such major problems when they purchased it that stuff is so unexplainable that they didn't know what to do with themselves. They didn't know who to turn to. They didn't know how to report it. They were making sure they weren't going insane. Maybe there was something going poison with the local water system. So they, caught on to other neighbors. Now the neighbors are next door, like a couple of 100 feet away. Some of the closest neighbors a mile and a half away. Well, everything in the location of the ranch is basically they had a bunch of cattle. One day, all of a sudden, this so-called wolf appears out of almost nowhere, manifest, starts attacking one of the cattle. Mr. Sherman gets out, and he actually had his partner with him, who was a cattle partner with him. Both got out, guns and rifles, point blank at this so-called wolf. And the shock of this one story of many of hundreds, is that the bullets didn't stop the wolf. The bullets did not kill the wolf. The bullets just passed through the wolf. So the wolf kept going at its going. These guys kept emptying their rounds until they basically literally wet their pants so bad that they ran so fast opposite way. Then this wolf just dissipated into the molecules of the air. So George Knapp, how he got involved, he heard about this story. He went out and basically interviewed the Shermans and said, you guys got something crazy here. And witnesses and eyewitnesses and people around the surrounding area said, yeah, it's all types of crazy stuff. There's these orange orbs that happen at night. UFOs are seen, multicolor beams coming out of the sky from the ground. Well, what's intriguing about this whole story, and the listeners could check it out, is out of Las Vegas, there was an aerospace company that's owned and controlled by Robert Bigelow. He's a billionaire status, not a millionaire, billionaire status. He owns Bigelow Aerospace. Well, this guy is so into paranormal and research, he purchased the whole property and gave the Shermans a substantial amount of money just to get them off the ranch ASAP. The ranch now is only secured by 24/7 security personnel. I come and go on 3 different shifts. And I got a proposal into Mr. Bigelow himself about coming up with some new technology concepts to see how active your ranch is and to pinpoint what's going on. They came back to me saying, we're reviewing your proposal, and they were asking me what specific areas, and I said, well, Everything from infrared to ultraviolet to an X-ray band of frequencies you could imagine that we want to scan and capture and monitor. So they're really intrigued with that if it can be done. So they don't want any really publicize it too much. Right now, they just get a security force of keeps some of the curiosity people away. But let me tell you something. You got to travel 155 miles out of Salt Lake City, and you got to really look and find this place, which you can find. I mean, you just got to know where the location is. But there's one gentleman, a friend of mine, who runs the skinwalker.org website.
I know him.
Skinwalker Ranch. You do know him?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, okay.
He's been on my show.
Oh, great. So what was his, did he tell you about his experience with the orbs over his head?
I'm trying to remember. I mean, this was like last year. I want to say his last name, if I remember correctly, was Miles, wasn't it?
Yes, correct. Yes, it was.
I can't, for the life of me, though, right now, remember his first name, but try to understand.
Brian?
Brian?
No, it should be Ryan.
Ryan, okay. Yeah, I was about to say, I've had like 250 shows over the last 5 years, and to try to remember everybody at a given moment can be a little tricky, so I hope you'll overlook that.
Oh, no problem.
But no, I don't remember him telling me about the orbs.
So he's so the listeners could go out to skinwalkerranch.org, check that out, and really good information and good material on there. But what intrigues me about this particular situation is you have a guy with a lot of money who captured the ranch, and he wants to probably find out what's behind this, what's going on. Now, I heard from Ryan, since you mentioned Ryan in the interview last year, he believes that the U.S. government is behind, or kind of behind Mr. Bigelow as far as keeping this ranch under
wrap,
watchful eyes.
Ah.
Mm-hmm.
Under surveillance.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what. It looks like we're just out at the end of the hour here. So I was wondering if you had any last-minute words for everybody. Like last-minute thoughts or whatever.
Yeah, what I have is, last-minute thoughts is, even though we get a lot of great technology of today, just be real, kind of taking it from a real debunking point of view and really look at it. The video evidence and pictures and stuff, again, could be easily tricked. The best way to really investigate something is if you do have the time, and of course, if you could get out to where the area of interest is. In other words, for example, I'll talk about the Skinwalker Ranch. Actually get out there to the area, camp out, and do your own research. Then you could come to your own conclusions. Like in my case, I actually try to go to the horse's mouth directly now in interrogating stuff. And like what I told you about Benny Barney Hill back in 1961, there was a book, the original book was written by John Fuller, and that was called The Interrupted Journey. Now, Betty and Barney Hill, Betty's sister had a daughter. Her name was Kathy, and Kathy Marden I'm really good friends with her, and she's the one that holds the Hills estate, and she wrote a book called Captured with Stan Friedman. So I do a lot of, personal interview and talking to her on the phone and stuff about her aunt and uncle's case, and, where a lot of this information makes you tend to believe that whatever happened to the Hills was based on a true event under hypnosis from Dr. Simon. So I'm saying to your audience out there, yeah, if you hear something that's really interesting, is trying to see if you could get to the first level. It might take some time to be a really good investigator, CSI, and get to what you think is truthful and what you think is believable, and then keep researching it. In other words, don't try to find an answer in 5 minutes.
Right.
I mean, there's cases out there, like say with the Hills case. I mean, I could come out with a brand new book and maybe sell 2 books because it's old story, it's old news. People of today, who cares? Whatever. But that case belongs to that 5% of all the outstanding cases out there. That there might be something going on, like say, as far as some passing by of our neighbors out in the universe. But the Skinwalker Ranch is an intriguing project. So I encourage anyone to, if they live by or they could get to it, hey, do some scouting, do some reconnaissance is the word I'm looking for, and let us know, man. Let me know,
Okay.
Because the whole thing is, hey, it'd be great to know that, there is another window, another door to another part of another universe, that we can't be the only ones here.
Right.
in this whole entire universe. That's the whole thing. It would be fantastic to know that we got other friends and neighbors live hundreds of thousands of light years away. It'd be great, man. It'd be just a wonderful, I think this would be a wonderful place then. People will say, that is great. We have neighbors. Maybe one day we'll come across and meet them, or they'll come by and say hello. Otherwise, it's kind of boring to say, hey, we got these 5 billion pain into the behinds on this planet. And that's it? That's it? There's nobody else? Get me off this planet. I'd like to go somewhere else and check it out. Maybe they got a better McDonald's somewhere else. Well, anyway, so that's kind of my recommendation, or my last couple minutes is, it'd be great to know that we are not alone. And you know what? That'd probably be the
last thing we hear.
Yeah. Well, just think, if you're really not alone, if you were not alone, and we could prove that we're not alone, that'll encourage people to really go out and try to contact, do some more and more, research out there, instead of like, but then like say, I've been hunting ghosts for so many years, but only if I could get one more step, But see, with the little, I call it trick or treat, once a ghost appears and it doesn't appear, it still keeps the people's motivation up there, because they were almost there and they almost got proof, but they need a little bit more proof, substantial proof. Same thing, if we have substantial proof of other life on other planets, that'd be great. Like, yay, we do have a neighbor. There is a dark side to the moon.
I think we do. I don't think God's that wasteful. One thing real quick, like I want to throw out there, is Jennifer put a link in the chat room, skinranchworker.org. Would that be the web page to that site you were talking about?
Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh, Skinwalker Ranch.
Skinwalkerranch.org.
Okay, well, this is something similar, I guess, but I'm sure we can look that up tomorrow. At any rate, it's been a pleasure having you, and, you're a very interesting man. I'd like to have you come back again sometime. Maybe if we have a little more time to share a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to do it next month or something, just pop me an email, and that'd be great. And I could actually tell you some a little bit more progress about the Skinwalker project there, but the goal is to see if we could get some substantial data out of that location there, and see what's going on. But what I'm hearing from the grapevine, especially from that organization, is that there is some serious stuff there, and that's why they got this area heavily guarded. So it's interesting, very interesting, especially if you look at it from a real serious inquiry. Why would somebody put somebody on payroll on 3 shifts on a deserted ranch in the middle of it and really nowhere? Unless you're hiding, like the U.S. Mint of gold, underground. But it's just intriguing, especially if you hear it from other people who are some serious researchers, that they got some good capture evidence, on film, but it's concentrated in that area there. So, and George Knapp also wrote a book where they microbiologist who was a co-author about the Skinwalker Ranch that they just released not too long ago. So.
All righty. Well, listen, Jennifer also said, thank you, Ron, and she says, wow, I love this guy.
Oh, that's great, man. Love it, too. That's great.
I'm going to be putting this up on YouTube and a few other sites as well, video sites, and I'll be sending you the links after I do. And like I said, I'm going to go ahead and call a wrap now. I want to thank you once again for coming on to the show, and I look forward to getting a hold of you again in the future. And I got your email address, and I'll plan to stay in touch.
Oh, that'd be great, man. Excellent.
All righty. Well, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you. Hey, have a great night. It was great talking to you guys.
You too now.
And we'll talk to you soon. Okay. Bud. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Okay. Now, real quick, before I cut the show down altogether, I wanted to mention to everybody to make sure you come back. Let me take a look at my schedule real quick. Thursday, December the 1st, that's this coming Thursday. And it's not one of my usual show times, so you might want to mark it on a calendar somewhere. And I'm going to be having Foster Gamble, great-grandson of James Gamble, of Procter & Gamble. And we're going to be talking about his latest project known as Thrive. And he's done a lot of research into a lot of areas, and this is promising to be a very interesting interview, so I hope to see everybody there. Also, I want to remind everybody to not forget to stop by United Paranormal International, and if you like them there, you go join up and, do some posting and be a part of the group that's over there. There's some really nice folks at that location. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show for the rest of the night and join my wife. And I want to thank you guys very much. I couldn't have a show without my listeners any more than I could without my guests. So I definitely appreciate you folks. And y'all have a good night.
That's right. Happy past Thanksgiving as well.
And the same to you. Hey, I got to tell you, I've been to your website, and you're a very interesting man. You get around, don't you?
Yeah. If I actually tell you what I do in my real life, your head would probably spin. Yeah, I mean, I could touch a little bit about that down the line, but it's definitely for the, you talk about people that, that they get all types of crazy stuff at different military bases and Area 51 and all that stuff. Well, that's what I do on a daily basis. So I could tell you what really goes on high level and put some of the skeptics apart and say, no, there's no really aliens walking around in Area 51. That is not the MO of that base. But what's intriguing about the whole thing here is if you take this whole paranormal world, I mean, I call it parapalooza.
Okay.
Bigfoot, cryptozoology, and all stuff. I mean, most of it is hoax and made up. Okay, and not to burst anyone's bubble out there. I mean, is there unexplainable events? Absolutely. I mean, in the field of ghostology, let's call it. I mean.
Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello, welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me tonight is going to be Ron, and I may be pronouncing his last name incorrectly. I'll let him correct me in a moment. Milione. And we're going to talk about some UFO detectors that he's invented, if I understand this correctly, and perhaps some other things that he's got going on that I may not be aware of. And, well, quite frankly, I got an email about him in one of the groups I was in, and I thought these UFO detectors sounded quite interesting, so I made it a point to get a hold of them. Thought you guys might like to hear about it. So, Ron, how you doing tonight?
Good. How you doing, Royce? It's yeah, you pronounce it Milione.
Milione. Okay, gotcha.
Close enough. Well, for somebody redneck to an Italian, I give you a lot of credit.
I really do apologize. I'll be honest with you. I do have trouble with names, at least at first.
Okay, man. That's okay. You hit the first one, and you won't be the last one either.
Yeah, right. Well, a lot of people call me a lot of different things too. At least they very seldom ever call me Halloween.
Expectation is the public knows it. Now, let me give you one thing as a fact. People might be hard to swallow this, but because I deal with the military, especially in the technology side. The military's technology is about 25 years ahead of what the commercial technology that you and I, or let's call it the average John Doe out there is used to. So if you walk into a Best Buy and you go, hey, 3D TV and all this type of technology, well, you'd be surprised what the military has. This figure almost 25 years more factor into it if you speed it up in time, like fast forward. That's kind of stuff that they're working on today that they actually have in prototype that works. So you got examples of the B-2 plane, you got the F-117 Nighthawk. Way back in the early 60s, you had the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71. These are just incredible machines, and just to show you what man could develop. And then, again, you deal with limited computing back in the 60s to make the U-2. Kelly Johnson did it in 9 months. So you imagine you take today's technology, and then you push 25 years plus on an average, and you get some amazing UFOs out there. So stuff flying over Nevada, not too far from where you are, because you're more closer than I am. It does right-angle turns and stuff like that. Well, you basically got between Adobe Edition, Photoshop, and everything else. I mean, you can create some really fantastic Hollywood convincing aircraft or spacecraft coming from an unknown planet and say, look what I saw.
A guy did that a couple of years ago. It was on YouTube. I remember it.
Yeah, exactly. So what you do is you go back to stuff that was before computers. So you go back to like the 60s, and then the 50s, and then the 40s. There, it's very, very difficult and a lot more challenging to make hoax than it is today. Today, actually, the average kindergarten kid could create a very ingenious hoax, and most adults will probably believe it because of the technology that was used, that are used, especially on the application level. But as far as if some of these things defy physics, stuff like that, like magnetic vortexes or disturbances, there is instrumentation out there that could detect that stuff. But it could prove that it's an unidentified flying object, but it does not prove that it's an aircraft or something from, another planet. In other words, it could be something unidentified to our normal means of transit. There is what we call sometimes an area of, suspended universe where a deceased doesn't go on. It's kind of still stuck in the present life form, and people see, apparitions and all that stuff. And you could photograph it. You might get some EVPs, recordings. But the whole part of that is you only could go so far, and you can't really, it should come to a limitation, right? Or you can't capture a ghost and contain it. So, I could say, is this place could be haunted? Not that I'm going off subject here, we're talking about UFOs, but what I'm trying to say is you could only go to a certain point, and that's about it. I mean, you could get a little bit more creative at instrumentation or detection, but you're really not ever going to say, hey, I got Aunt Sally, kept as a trophy in this enclosed system, so everyone come and see. And and she'll actually speak to you in real time and tell you what's happening on the, at the end of the tunnel, all the so-called heaven and earth, right? So what I'm trying to get at is there's some explained, some unexplained. But what's interesting about the UFO business, that the further back you go is more interesting than the present day. The present day,
yeah,
you got quite a collection of software applications that could really capture your imagination. I mean,